So today we are going to continue on the previous. Uh, Today we are going to continue from the last Bible study, and I would like to start with reading 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. It says, "Now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come." So today we are going to talk about the history of the church, and it will be the part one. And the title of today's study is Before Christ. So some might say, is it history again? Is it something that I already knows, or is something that's nothing new, nothing special? But in letters 33, 1890, it says the past history of the cause of God needs to be often brought before the people, young and old, that they may be familiar with it. How frequently were the waymarks set up by the Lord in his dealing with ancient Israel, that they should forget the history of the past. Christ, their invisible leader, commanded Moses to form the history of these events into song, that the people of Israel might teach them to their children. So as this paragraph shows, history is very, very important. And it is instructed to us that we should repeat over and over again. And during the time of Moses, God even told them to make history or stories into a song and repeat it over and over again. So if you know the history already, still we have to go over it again. History is very important that we have to repeat. Then the question is, why is it important? Why does history matter to me? What does history have things to do with me? So first, it's a pattern. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9, it's written, "The thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." As it is said commonly, history repeats. So by looking into the history, we can see the pattern. And when we face the new challenges in our life, we see that what should we do to not to repeat the history, and it help us to expect what's going to happen next and how we can do differently from the mistakes in the past. And indeed, when we look into the biblical histories, when we look into the ancient Israel, the stories of patriarchs, the story of the disciples, we learn so much. We see ourselves in them also. So that's why the history matters for us. It makes us reflect on where we are. And also, it's important because it's direction. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 is written again, "Now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come." Upon whom the ends of the world are come. As the people who is living in our last era, it's important for us to know history, because by looking into the history, we know where we are and we know what's coming next. So when we look into the river or the flow of water, we know the direction by knowing where it came from, and because we know where it came from, we know to where it is going. So we see that there are so many things happening in the world, and after things happens, we look into the history and then understand why. For example, I was very surprised when the Ukraine-Russia war happened, when there was a war between the Sri Lanka or India. It happened lately, and when I wasn't familiar with their history, And it was a great surprise for me. But for those who knew about their history, they knew that wars might happen soon. And when I researched their history, I found out that it was predicted that there will be a conflict and there will be a war. So it was surprised. Those news were surprised for me because I didn't know about those histories. So that being said, the history is a key to understand where we are in the present. And by understanding the history, we can see the flow of the events, and the flow we can see where it's going to be leading to the next. So history shows us direction. So without understanding that history, we will be lost. And that's why it's important to know the history, and that's why it matters to us. So before getting into the history of the church, it starts with the great controversy. And we will get in more details about that great controversy in another lesson. So today we will just talk very briefly about it. So how did the great controversy happen? It started by Satan attacking the God's throne. Satan wanted to be the king of the universe. But there is no way that Satan can win over God by the physical fight or by violence. So what he did was he tried to prove God was wrong. And then to do so, he deceived so many people and he spread the error. And by those people who is deceived or committing sins, he tried to prove that he was right. But there was always people who proved Satan was wrong and that God was right. And those are the faithful people, and that's also called the church. It started as the patriarchs. Patriarchs were more in a form of families. So, for example, there was Adam, there was Enoch, there was Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob's 12 sons. Regarding them, in manuscripts 92, 1897, is written as follows. God has never left his church without a witness. In all the scenes of trial and proving, of opposition and persecution amid moral darkness, through which the church has passed, God has had men of opportunity who have been prepared to take up his work at different stages and carry it forward and upward. Through patriarchs and prophets, he revealed his truth to his people. Christ was the teacher of his ancient people, as very as he was when he came to our world clothed in the garments of humanity. Hiding his glory in human form, he often appeared to his people and talked with them face to face as a man speaketh with his friend. So during these times, even when there was a darkness, a spiritual darkness on this earth, God always has someone faithful and someone who understands the truth and someone who shows that the truth, that God is truth, that God is right. And as this family became bigger and bigger, it became tribes and it became nation. And that was the time of the kings and prophets. So during the time of Moses, there was the church in the wilderness. There was the people of Israel, and it continues as the people of Israel being led by judges and later by kings, and there was always prophets throughout the ages. In Sister White wrote in Australasian Union Conference record June 1st, 1900, the purpose which God seeks to accomplish through his people today is the same that he desired to accomplish through Israel when he brought them forth out of Egypt. By beholding the goodness, the mercy, the justice, and the love of God revealed in the church, the world is to have a representation of his character. And when the law of God is thus exemplified in the life, even the world will recognize the superiority of those who love and serve God above every other people on the face of the earth. The Lord has his eye upon every one of his people. He has his plans concerning each. It is his purpose that those who practice his holy precepts shall be a distinguished people. So here it shows what was the purpose of the church, what was the purpose of the people of Israel. It says, by beholding the goodness, the mercy, the justice, and the love of God revealed in the church, the world is to have a representation of his character. So again, in the great controversy, Satan has been trying to deceive people. Satan has been throwing errors. And amid of those spiritual darkness, God had a peculiar people who keep the truth. And first, it was the truth as a doctrine and other teachings. But church is required to do more than that. It is not only about teaching and preaching about the truth. That's also important. But to apply it in their life. To make those truths not only a theory, but alive. So the duty of the people of Israel was to show, to reflect the character of God, because the character of God is the truth. The doctrines and written words are only the copy of his character. It's only the written form of his character. So they have to bring it into their life and reflect his character and show his love through their actions, through their words, through their facial expressions, through every single things they do. As Jesus came on this earth, and as the shadow met the Jesus, now it switched from the nation of form. It switched from God switched from the form of nations into the form of church. It started with the followers of Jesus, and in the Acts of Apostles, page 9, is written as follows: the church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. From the beginning, it has been God's plan that through his church shall be reflected to the world his fullness and his sufficiency. The members of the church, those whom he has called out of darkness into his marvelous light, are to show forth his glory. The church is the repository of the riches of the grace of Christ, and through the church will eventually be made manifest, even to the principalities and powers in heavenly places, the final and full display of the church of God. And again, here is written that what is the church for? The church is the representation of God's character and God's kingdom on this earth. And this church exists as an agency for the salvation of men. So as conclusion, we can analyze the present and make the right choices by learning lessons from the past. History is the key to understand where we came from, where we are now, and where we are going. And God has always had a faithful people in every generation, and the purpose of the church is to reflect his glory to the world. The church is not merely a building, but his faithful people. So next week, we will continue talking about the history. We talked the history about until the point that Jesus came on this earth. And next week, we will continue from how Jesus established the earth and the history of the early church.